At Christmas dinner, I showed up uninvited at my brother's house. Mom looked me up and down and said, "Don't touch the food. You weren't counted." I said nothing. A few hours later, I saw the $1,800 charge on my card. So I did this and watched them panic. Sup Reddit. Strap in and get some snacks. Let's get into the shit show. Name's Elias, 28 male, and I fix freight elevators for a living. The old ones in Manhattan that make sounds no machine should make. The ones that move cargo between floors in buildings older than most family trees. Buildings where the original elevator shafts are hand-dug through solid granite, and the machinery is so old it probably predates indoor plumbing. It's not glamorous work. My hands are permanently calloused. I've got scars on my forearms from cables that snapped while I was elbow-deep in machinery. One on my left shoulder from a counterweight that swung loose during a particularly ugly repair job in the meatpacking district. I've seen guys lose fingers, toes. One old-timer I knew lost 3 teeth when a wrench ricocheted off a stubborn bolt and caught him in the face. The job has risks, but I'm good at it. The union pays well. And there's something honest about work where you either fix the problem or you don't. For 6 years, I've been the guy my mother calls when her rent is short, when Con Ed threatens to shut off the power, when her credit cards are maxed and she needs someone to bail her out before the collectors start calling. I've been doing this since I was 22, fresh out of trade school with grease under my fingernails and the first real paycheck I'd ever seen. Felt like I'd cracked some code. Work hard, show up on time, learn the job, and people will actually pay you enough to live on. Revolutionary concept for someone who grew up watching his mother bounce between minimum wage jobs and boyfriends who'd stick around just long enough to drain whatever savings had accumulated before disappearing. The first phone call from her came 3 weeks after I started. She was crying. Said the landlord was threatening eviction. Said she'd missed a payment because of some emergency she couldn't quite explain. Kept saying she didn't know what else to do, and I was the only one who could help. I emptied my account that same day, handed her $2,400 in cash. She hugged me at the door of her apartment. She told me I was the only person she could count on. Promised she'd pay me back as soon as things turned around. That was 6 years ago. Things never turned around, and she never paid me back. The requests stopped being requests around year 2. They turned into expectations, guilt trips disguised as commands. Now she just texts me the amount and the deadline. Sometimes she adds a heart emoji like that softens the demand. Sometimes she just sends the number. No please, no context, no pretense of asking. Just a figure and a date and the understanding that I'll handle it because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. My older brother Isaac has never sent me a single request for money. He's never needed to. In my mother's eyes, Isaac is the success story. The proof that she did something right, despite the chaos and the instability. He graduated from NYU with a degree in finance while I was learning how to diagnose motor failures in industrial equipment. While I was crawling through elevator shafts covered in decades of grime, he was wearing suits to job interviews. He married a woman named Celeste who comes from old money. Her family has a summer house in Connecticut. She treats everyone outside her tax bracket like the help, polite enough on the surface, but with this way of looking through you that makes it clear you're not registering as a person. They live in a renovated brownstone in Park Slope. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. A backyard garden that gets featured in neighborhood home tours. My mother posts photos of their dinner parties on social media. She shows the pictures to her friends at church. She talks about Isaac like he was made of gold. I am not mentioned. I am not photographed. I am not acknowledged as existing in any way that might require explanation. I learned early that I wasn't the favorite. I was the backup, the utility player, the one they called when things broke down, but never invited when things were going well. My childhood was a series of moments where I sat at the edge, while Isaac sat at the center. When he was in high school, he got private tutors and SAT prep courses and weekend college visits to schools with names everyone recognized. My mother drove him to campus tours at Columbia and NYU and Cornell. She bought him prep books and practice tests and whatever else the guidance counselor suggested. When I was in high school, I got a different counselor entirely, a tired woman with a stack of files on her desk. She looked at my grades and my address and my family situation and told me trade school was a perfectly respectable path for someone like you. I still remember the way she said it. Like she was doing me a favor by lowering my expectations before life could do it for me. Isaac got a graduation party with catered food and a DJ and relatives flying in from 3 states who I didn't even know we had. I got a card with $50 in it and a handshake from my mother's then boyfriend. And somehow, over the years, I convinced myself this was just how things worked. Someone had to be the reliable one. Someone had to keep the machine running while everyone else enjoyed the ride. I thought that someone was supposed to be me. Here's what 6 years of being that someone looks like in actual numbers. My mother rents a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria. The old part. The part where the N train rumbles so loud it shakes the windows at 3 a.m. The building has a super who speaks 4 words of English and a front door lock that's been broken since before I started paying for anything. Rent is $2,100 a month. I cover it. Utilities run another $180 in summer and $340 in winter because she refuses to wear a sweater indoors and keeps the heat cranked to 78. I cover that too. Her cell phone bill with unlimited everything she doesn't use. Her cable package with every premium channel and 3 sports tiers she's never watched a single game on. Her credit card minimum payments on 2 cards she maxes out. Her medical copays for appointments. Her Metro card. I cover all of it. Monthly average, just under $2,700. Some months it spikes when there's an emergency like a root canal or a new air conditioner or a laptop she absolutely needs for reasons she can't explain and never uses after the first week. Never drops below $2,200. I've sent my mother just over $192,000 in 6 years. Not loans, gifts. Because she never offered to pay me back, and I stopped asking after the first year when she looked at me like I'd insulted her by even bringing it up. And me? I live in a studio apartment in Sunnyside. I don't own a car because parking in the city is a scam, and the subway gets me where I need to go. My furniture came from a guy on my crew who was getting divorced and needed to empty his apartment in a weekend. He let me take the couch, the kitchen table, and a bookshelf for $200 total. I eat a lot of rice and beans, pasta when I'm feeling fancy. I haven't taken a real vacation since I was 19, and my buddy's parents let me tag along to their cabin upstate for a long weekend. But my mother? She eats out 3 times a week at restaurants, gets her hair done at the salon, buys herself jewelry for no reason, and clothes she wears once and then forgets about. Isaac knows about all of this. He has to. He's seen the text when I've been at family gatherings, the phone buzzing with demands I'm expected to fulfill. He's been at her apartment when I've shown up with cash because she couldn't wait for a transfer to clear. But he's never acknowledged it, never offered to split the burden, never even thanked me on her behalf. He just sits there and looks at me like I'm the maintenance guy who forgot to knock. My mother has built a whole narrative where Isaac is the successful son who made something of himself through talent and hard work, and I'm the screw-up who owes her for all the sacrifices she made raising me alone. Never mind that I raised myself. Never mind that I was making my own lunches at 8 years old while she slept until noon. Never mind that I did my own laundry at 10 and learned to cook at 12 because the alternative was going hungry. In her version of history, I'm the burden she carried, and now it's my turn to carry her. At least that's how it worked. Until Christmas. Christmas dinner was at Isaac's brownstone in Park Slope. I found out about it 3 days beforehand from Sal, a guy on my crew who's been fixing elevators since before I was born. Sal is 58 years old with hands like leather work gloves. He's been in the business for 31 years, survived 3 union strikes, 2 economic crashes, and 1 elevator freefall that he walked away from with nothing but a bruised shoulder and a story he tells at every job site. Started as an apprentice and never looked back. He's forgotten more about this job than most guys will ever learn. He's the closest thing I have to a mentor. We work together 3 or 4 days a week, and he's taught me more about elevator repair than trade school ever did. Real knowledge you can only get from decades of doing the work. His wife, Rosa, runs in the same church circles as my mother. Small world. Queens is like that. Everyone knows someone who knows someone else. Rosa mentioned the Christmas dinner at their holiday service earlier that week. Said it sounded lovely. Said she'd heard they were hiring a private chef. A private chef. This part matters later. 3 months earlier, my mother had called me about a deposit for a catering company she wanted to book for some event she was vague about. Said she needed $400 up front or they wouldn't hold the date. Said she'd pay me back. Standard stuff. I paid it over the phone, gave them my card number, and forgot about it. The chef Isaac hired for Christmas dinner was from the same company. Same account. My card was still on file as the backup payment method. I didn't know this at the time. Didn't even think about it. Sal told me about the dinner over coffee before our shift. He had this look on his face. Testing something. I hadn't been invited. Not a phone call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive mention that I could interpret as an opening. But I still showed up anyway. Isaac's brownstone sits on a tree-lined street where the garbage cans have brass handles. The houses all have stoops with wrought iron railings and holiday wreaths on the doors. I took the subway from Queens, transferred twice in stations, walked 8 blocks from the station in the cold weather, and stood on the stoop for a full minute before I knocked. The door was massive. Celeste answered. I watched her eyes go from my work boots, which I'd cleaned but couldn't make look new, to my jeans, to my jacket, with the grease stain I couldn't get out no matter how many times I washed it. She glanced back into the house like she was checking if anyone had seen me arrive. She stepped aside without saying a word and let me into a hallway that smelled like pine and cinnamon and expensive scented candles. Christmas music was playing from somewhere deeper in the house. I could hear laughter from the dining room, the kind that comes with comfort and not worrying about where your next meal is coming from or whether the check you wrote for rent is going to bounce. I walked toward the sound. The dining room was something out of a home design magazine. Long table with a white cloth, crystal glasses that caught the candlelight, silver utensils at every place setting. And at the center of it all, my mother, sitting at the head of the table like she'd bought the place herself, wearing a green velvet dress. There were 8 other people, Isaac at the opposite end from my mother, playing host, Celeste's empty chair next to his. Some friends of theirs I half recognized from social media photos, 2 couples. I stepped into the doorway. The laughter stopped like someone had pulled a plug. Every head turned toward me. 8 pairs of eyes doing the same math Celeste had done at the door. My mother's expression cycled through about 4 emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise, confusion, annoyance, and then something colder. Elias, what are you doing here? It's Christmas. I'm your son. Figured that was enough of a reason. She didn't even blink. You weren't invited. Didn't realize I needed an invite to see my own family. Well, she picked up her glass. Now you do. Isaac leaned back in his chair at the far end. He had this amused look on his face. You can stand over there if you're gonna stay, but don't touch anything on the table. We ordered exactly enough for the people who were supposed to be here. I looked at the table. Roast lamb glistening under the chandelier light. Rosemary potatoes. 3 kinds of sides. The works. Enough food to feed 20 people easily, and they were telling me there wasn't enough for 1 more plate. I didn't keep arguing. Didn't make a scene. Just stood there in the doorway while my mother picked up her glass and turned to one of Isaac's friends to continue whatever conversation I'd interrupted. Isaac smirked at Celeste, who had returned to her seat. The table slowly went back to normal, laughter resuming like I'd never walked in. I was invisible, standing 6 feet from a table full of people sharing a meal I'd indirectly paid for, and I was completely invisible. After maybe 2 minutes that felt like 20, I turned and walked out. I was 3 blocks away, hands shoved in my pockets, breath clouding in front of me, when my phone buzzed. Payment notification. $1,847 charged to my card at the catering company. Isaac had used the payment method saved on my mother's account, the one I'd put on file 3 months earlier for that deposit she'd asked for. He knew it was there. She'd probably told him. And he'd charged the entire Christmas dinner to my card, figuring I'd just eat the cost like I always did. He'd made me pay for a dinner I wasn't allowed to eat. Charged my card for the food they told me not to touch. In the same hour. I stood there on the sidewalk in Park Slope, cold biting through my jacket, staring at that notification until my screen went dark. Something clicked. The hurt turned into something sharper. Something I could actually use. I opened my banking app, found the pending charge, filed a dispute immediately. The charge flipped to pending review, and that was all I needed. Then I walked to the subway and went home. That night, I sat there in my apartment for 3 hours. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't check my phone for anything except that dispute notification sitting there like a receipt. Didn't eat even though I hadn't had dinner because I wasn't counted. Just sat there in the dark thinking about the last 6 years. Every payment, every text with a number and a deadline. Every time I'd scrape together money I didn't have to give to someone who never said thank you. Eventually, I opened my laptop and started documenting. I went through 6 years of bank statements, every transfer, every payment, every automatic withdrawal that went to an account that wasn't mine. I organized it by year, by category, by amount. Rent, utilities, credit cards, medical, random cash requests she never explained and I never questioned. Printed the whole thing out. 47 pages. Laid it all out like I was building a case against myself for being dumb enough to let it go on this long. $192,380. That's what the spreadsheet showed when I was done. 6 years of funding a life I wasn't allowed to be part of. 6 years of sacrifice that nobody had ever acknowledged. I saved the spreadsheet. Then I opened a new browser tab and started canceling things. First, the rent. I'd been sending her $2,100 every month through an automatic transfer. She told me that was what her rent cost. Logged into my bank, found the recurring payment, and deleted it. Saved the confirmation. Then the utilities. Con Ed, National Grid, Spectrum for her cable and internet. One by one, I removed my payment methods from every account she'd linked me to over the years. Some of them I didn't even remember setting up. Automatic payments running in the background like subscriptions I'd forgotten to cancel. Saved every confirmation email. Then the credit cards. She'd made me an authorized user on 2 of them so I could pay the minimums when she forgot, which was always. I called the automated lines, navigated the menus, and removed myself from both accounts. It took 4 hours. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up. My phone had buzzed a dozen times with texts from my mother. Where did you go? Why did you leave? Call me back. I need to talk to you about something important. I didn't respond to any of them. I met Sal at our usual diner near the Garment District job site the next morning. Place called Mike's, been there since the 70s, serves coffee that tastes like motor oil, and eggs that somehow always hit right. He was already in a booth by the window when I walked in, cup of black coffee in front of him, the sports section spread out on the table. The waitress knew us both by name, brought me coffee without asking. He looked up when I sat down. You look like a guy who didn't get any sleep last night. I told him everything. The Christmas dinner. Standing in the doorway while they ate. My mother's face when she told me I wasn't counted. The charge on my credit card for a meal I wasn't allowed to touch. The 6 years of payments I'd finally added up. The $192,000 that had disappeared into her life while I lived like I was broke. Sal listened without interrupting. He's good at that. When I finished, he folded the newspaper and set it aside. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him thinking about something. My old man was the same way, he said finally. Different details, same deal. Guy who just kept taking until there was nothing left to take. Treated me like a walking ATM. What did you do about it? Nothing. For 20 years, not a damn thing. Kept paying. Kept showing up. Kept thinking maybe one of these times he'd actually say thanks. He shook his head. Never happened. How'd it end? I ended it. Woke up one morning and realized I was 50 years old and still waiting for my father to treat me like a person instead of a piggy bank. He took a sip of cold coffee. Only thing I regret is waiting so long to pull the plug. He looked at me for a long moment. You want another 6 years of this? I didn't need to think about the answer. The texts from my mother started getting desperate around day 3. Elias the rent didn't go through something's wrong with the bank. Then angry. Elias, I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not funny. Then weaponized. Elias, after everything I did for you, after everything I sacrificed, you owe me this. I didn't respond. Just let the notifications pile up and deleted them in batches every evening. Isaac called on day 5. I answered, mostly because I was curious what angle he'd take, whether he'd try charm or intimidation or guilt. He went straight for righteousness. You gotta fix this. Mom's completely losing it. Not my problem anymore. Not your... He let out this laugh, but there was zero humor in it. She's your mother, Elias. You can't just cut her off like this. I'm not cutting her off. I'm just done being the only one who pays for everything while you sit in your brownstone acting like I don't exist. Come on, that's not fair. I've got my own stuff going on. Real responsibilities. Right. And I've got a studio apartment and rice for dinner 3 nights a week because every dollar I make goes to a woman who won't even save me a seat at Christmas dinner. I let that hang there. How much have you sent her over the last 6 years, Isaac? Total. Go ahead, I'll wait. He got quiet. Yeah, that's what I figured. I hung up. That's when things started getting interesting. 2 days later, I got a letter from my landlord. Someone had filed a complaint against me with the city housing department. Anonymous tip. Said I was running an illegal business out of my apartment and subletting rooms without permission. Complete garbage since my apartment barely fits one person, let alone multiple. But now I had to deal with a mandatory inspection and documentation requests. Then, my credit card got frozen. Fraud alert. Someone had tried to open 3 new accounts in my name. The addresses on the applications were all variations of my mother's apartment in Astoria. One of them had misspelled her street name. Amateur hour. Then my union rep called me into the office. Said someone had sent an email accusing me of stealing tools from job sites and running a side business selling parts. No evidence. No specifics. Just vague accusations designed to create problems and put a flag in my file. I knew who was behind it. Isaac was coming at me from every angle, trying to make my life miserable enough that I'd cave and go back to being the quiet guy who paid the bills and asked for nothing. I mentioned it to Sal the next day at work. We were replacing a motor on a freight elevator in a textile warehouse on 39th Street. Old building. Older machinery. Sal wiped his hands on a rag and shook his head. Your brother sounds like a real piece of work. He's trying to squeeze me until I fold. Is it working? Nope. He nodded slowly. Good. You need help shutting this down? You know people who can help? He almost smiled. Kid, I know everybody. Sal knows people. 3 decades in the business in New York means knowing building managers, superintendents, fire marshals, city inspectors, union reps, and about 40 guys scattered across the 5 boroughs who owe you favors for that time you helped them out of a jam. He made some calls from the break room while I finished the wiring on the motor. Within a week, the housing complaint was dismissed after the inspector found nothing and flagged the complaint itself as frivolous. Apparently, the anonymous tipster had claimed I was running a manufacturing operation out of a 340-square-foot studio. The inspector laughed when he saw the place. My credit was unfrozen after I filed a police report for identity theft, with documentation showing the applications came from my mother's address. The accusation at work was the interesting one. The union rep traced the email to an account that had been created using Isaac's work email as the recovery address. He'd set up what he thought was an anonymous account, but he'd linked it to his actual work email for password recovery. They didn't press anything formal, but they made a detailed note in my file clearing my name completely and flagging the complaint as malicious. Isaac had overplayed his hand, got sloppy because he'd never had to be careful. And then I got something even better. About a week after I canceled the autopay, I was still thinking about those numbers. $2,100 a month for 6 years. That's a lot of money for a 2-bedroom in that part of Astoria. The building wasn't nice. The neighborhood wasn't trendy. Something didn't add up, so I called the property management company that handled her building. Told them I was considering renting in the area and asked about availability and rates. The woman gave me the rundown. Studios starting at $1,400, 1 bedrooms at $1,550, 2 bedrooms at $1,650, $1,650. I hung up and sat there for a while. 6 years. She'd looked me in the eye for 6 years and told me her rent was $2,100. Never flinched, never hesitated, just took the extra $450 every month like it was hers to take. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called back an hour later and asked to speak to someone about a tenant in apartment 4B. Said I was a family member worried about a possible eviction situation and wanted to understand what was going on before I decided whether to help out. The woman transferred me to their accounts department. The guy there was helpful. Said apartment 4B was behind on rent by 4 months. Owed $6,600. Said they'd been sending warning letters since October. Said eviction paperwork was being prepared. I'd been sending her $2,100 every month for 6 years. The actual rent was $1,650. She'd been pocketing $450 a month, every month, for 6 years. $32,400 she'd straight up stolen from me on top of everything else. Money I'd sent her for rent that she'd been funneling into her own pocket while simultaneously falling behind on what she actually owed the landlord. I sat in my apartment that night doing the math over and over. $192,000 in payments, and $32,400 of that was the rent overage she'd been pocketing for herself. 6 years of my money, gone. To someone who looked me in the eye on Christmas and told me I wasn't counted. The next day I called the property management company again, asked if they were still trying to work something out with the tenant before filing the formal eviction. We're open to working with the family, the woman said. If someone wants to cover the back rent and co-sign a new lease with verified income, we can make this whole thing go away. And if nobody does that, then we move forward with the eviction. 30 days to vacate. Go ahead and move forward then. There was a pause. So just to confirm, you're saying you won't be co-signing or making a payment on what's owed? That's correct. Understood. We'll file the paperwork. 2 weeks later, my mother got served with an official eviction notice. 30 days to vacate the premises or face forcible removal by the city marshals. The eviction moved forward in February, coldest month of the year in New York. My mother had until the 15th to be out of the apartment she'd lived in for over a decade. Isaac had to take her in. Not because he wanted to, not because he felt any real family obligation, but because he had no choice. Celeste's family was watching. Their social circle was watching. You can't let your mother become homeless when you live in a brownstone worth $2 million. Looks terrible. The kind of thing that gets whispered about at book clubs and charity galas for years afterward. But the brownstone wasn't exactly the safe haven everyone expected. I heard about it through Sal, who heard it from Rosa, who still kept in touch with people from the old neighborhood. My mother and Celeste were going at each other within the first week. My mother wanted to rearrange the living room to make it more homey and less sterile. Celeste wanted her to stay in the guest room and not touch anything that wasn't explicitly hers. My mother complained about the food being too fancy and not having enough flavor, about the temperature being kept too low, about the lack of premium cable channels and having to use streaming services she didn't understand. Celeste started scheduling business trips to cities where she had absolutely no business, just to avoid being home. Isaac was stuck in the middle of a war he couldn't talk his way out of. And Isaac doesn't do middle. He's the golden boy, the one who floats above problems while other people deal with the mess. Being forced to actually handle a conflict he couldn't delegate, couldn't pay someone else to fix, couldn't smooth over with some clever line, was slowly driving him crazy. His administrative leave from his firm turned into a termination in March. Turns out the union rep had flagged what they found about Isaac using his work email for the fake accusation, and word got back to his employer. Once they started looking into him, They found inconsistencies in his expense reports going back 2 years. Client dinners that were actually personal meals with friends. Travel expenses that didn't quite match up when you looked at the receipts closely. Entertainment charges that couldn't be tied to any actual client meetings. Small stuff individually. He started looking for new positions immediately. Got interviews at first. Went in with the confidence of someone who expected to be hired on the spot, because that's how things had always worked for him. But the finance world in New York is smaller than it looks from the outside. Word gets around fast. Whispers about why someone really left a good firm. Questions about whether there's more to the story. One hiring manager apparently asked him point blank about the expense report thing. Isaac tried to spin it. The interviewer ended the meeting early. By April, he'd been rejected by 4 different firms. By May, the callbacks had stopped completely. Meanwhile, I got a promotion. The union rep who'd investigated the complaint against me was named Terrence, built like a refrigerator, with hands that looked like they could bend rebar. He'd been impressed by how I'd handled everything. When a supervisor position opened up at a new hospital construction project in the Bronx, Terrence recommended me for it personally. More money, better hours, a crew of 6 guys working under me who I'd be responsible for training and managing. Real responsibility. Sal threw me a small celebration at our usual diner. Just a few guys from various job sites, some sandwiches on paper plates, a cake Rosa picked up from a bakery near her church. Nobody made speeches. We ate, told stories about the worst elevator disasters we'd seen over the years, and went back to work. It wasn't some big Hollywood moment, just life evening things out in a way that actually felt earned. But the fallout wasn't done yet. Celeste left Isaac in June, just packed a bag one morning while he was at another interview that would go nowhere, left a note on the kitchen counter saying her lawyers would be in touch, and walked out. Took the good car. Left him the one with the lease payments he couldn't afford anymore. The brownstone went on the market a week later to split the assets. My mother had to find somewhere else to go, and this time Isaac didn't have the resources to make it easy for her. He tried to set her up in different places over the following months. An assisted living facility in New Jersey that she walked out of after 2 weeks. She'd complained to the staff so much they were relieved to see her go. A small apartment in Staten Island she said was too far from everything. A room in the house of some woman from her church who asked her to leave after a month because she wouldn't stop criticizing the decor and kept moving furniture around without asking. She burned every bridge with complaints and demands and the absolute certainty that she deserved better than whatever anyone was offering. Last I heard, she was living in a studio apartment in a rough part of Newark. Subsidized housing. Shared laundry room in the basement. No premium cable. No doorman. No one to impress. Just 4 walls and a window and the consequences of treating people like they only existed to serve her. I got a letter from her in August. Handwritten. 3 pages. She talked about her sacrifices, her struggles, the years she spent raising me alone, how hard her life had been, and how unfair everything turned out, how I was the only person who had ever really understood her. Then came the ask. She wanted me to make things right, pay off her credit card debt, help her find a better place to live, set up some kind of monthly payment to get her back on her feet. She ended by saying she forgave me for abandoning her, for destroying Isaac's career, for ruining Christmas. She was willing to let it all go if I was willing to step up and be the son she deserved. I read the letter twice. Then I walked to the kitchen, dropped it in the trash, and made myself dinner. 2 months later, I ran into Isaac on the street. Random. He looked different, thinner, grayer around the temples than a guy in his mid-30s should be. His suit was nice but not tailored. Off the rack. He said he didn't want to get into it. Said he was tired of fighting. Asked if we could just talk like normal people for once. We ended up at a coffee shop around the corner. Neither of us ordered anything. Just sat at a table by the window watching the city go by outside. He told me what happened with his job, with his marriage. Celeste brought in better lawyers and a forensic accountant who found money Isaac had shuffled around during the separation. The brownstone sold, but most of the profit went to debts and settlements. He was renting a 1-bedroom in Murray Hill, picking up consulting work wherever he could find it. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Why'd you do all this? Why'd you just let everything blow up like that? I thought about it for a while. I didn't do anything to you, Isaac. I just stopped doing stuff for you. That's not. 6 years, I said. I paid for everything, every single month. And the one time I showed up expecting to be treated like family, you told me not to touch the food. I looked at him. You charged my card for that dinner. While I was standing there in your doorway being told I wasn't counted, you were charging me for the whole meal. He didn't say anything. Everything that happened after that happened because none of you could keep things together without my money. Not because I went out of my way to hurt anyone. I just stopped helping people who made it clear they didn't want me around. He sat there for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yeah, I get it, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I looked at him. He meant it. Maybe for the first time in his life, he actually meant something he was saying to me. Yeah, you should be. Then I stood up, left a few bucks on the table, and walked out. I'm still fixing elevators, still living in Sunnyside, though I upgraded to a one-bedroom last month. Real kitchen, actual closet, window that faces the street instead of a wall. I've got money in savings for the first time in my life, thinking about buying a used car so I can take weekend trips upstate. I don't talk to my mother anymore. Don't plan to. Some people are just ongoing projects you pour yourself into forever, and the smartest move is figuring out when it's time to walk off the job. Isaac and I exchange texts once in a while, not pretending we're tighter than we actually are. Just quick check-ins. He's working at a smaller firm now. Less prestige, less money. I spent 6 years paying my way into a family that didn't want me, trying to buy acceptance, trying to earn love from people who weren't capable of giving it. And then I stopped, because I finally got it through my head that the only person who gets to decide if I'm worth something is me. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.